we can all help deliver. Throughout my own cancer journey, I've been profoundly moved by what I can only call the community of care that surrounds every cancer patient. The specialists, the nurses, researchers and volunteers.
There are moments in royal history that arrive with fanfare. Trumpets, balconies, crowds pressed against iron gates. And then there are moments that arrive quietly through a television screen in the middle of an otherwise ordinary evening. This was one of those. No announcement had prepared the public for it. No headline had warned them it was coming. Just a king seated in Clarence House speaking directly into a camera for Channel 4's Stand Up to Cancer. For a monarch trained his entire life to keep composure, to give away as little as possible, this was different. He was not reading from behind a podium. He was not surrounded by aides. He was simply talking about cancer, about his own. Early diagnosis, he said, quite simply saves lives. Simple words, but not simple to say. Because this was a king admitting, on camera in front of millions, that his own body had needed saving. He spoke of the 2 years since his diagnosis, of treatment, of what he called the community of care that surrounds every patient going through what he had gone through. And then came the line that made royal watchers sit up straight. His treatment, he said, could now be reduced. A personal blessing, he called it, but a palace spokesman speaking afterward chose different words, careful ones. The king had responded exceptionally well. His care would now move into what they called a precautionary phase. Not remission, not the end of anything, just a shift, a quieter chapter following 2 loud and difficult years. For a family that communicates almost entirely through statements, through language chosen 1 word at a time, that distinction mattered. Hello, viewers. Before we go further into this story, here's a simple question for you. When you first heard that King Charles was scaling back his cancer treatment, did that news make you feel relief or worry? Drop a single word in the comments, relief or worry. We'd love to know how you felt in that moment. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Because this was only the beginning of the story. What the public didn't fully grasp in that first wave of headlines was how much had been building quietly behind that one broadcast. A king choosing his words with surgical precision. A family that had already lived through one health crisis that year, and a son who was about to step, more visibly than ever, into the spotlight his father had always occupied alone. The broadcast lasted only a few minutes. Its aftershocks would last far longer. Palace statements are never accidents. Every word is chosen. Every phrase is weighed, revised, and weighed again before it ever reaches a camera or a press release. So when the language changed, people noticed. Not remission, not cured. Instead, responded exceptionally well. A precautionary phase. Words built to reassure without promising anything they couldn't guarantee. Why does that distinction matter? Because in a family that speaks in code, ambiguity is often the most honest thing they can offer. A king cannot stand in front of the nation and declare victory over an illness that may still be present in some form. But he also cannot stay silent while his people search his face for answers. So the palace found a middle path, reduced treatment, continued monitoring, a future that sounded hopeful without pretending to be certain. Royal correspondents pored over every syllable. Some read it as good news, plainly stated. Others read caution behind the careful phrasing, a family choosing words that could shift meaning depending on what came next. Here is the truth. Both readings were fair. That is what made the moment so unusual. A health update that offered relief and uncertainty in the very same sentence. For 2 years, the public had watched Charles disappear from view during his most intensive treatment periods, then reappear for engagements when he was able. Each version of him, present, then absent, then present again, had already trained the nation to read his health through the rhythm of his calendar rather than through direct answers. This update changed that rhythm again. Fewer appointments, fewer clinical visits, more room, potentially, for the kind of full public life he had spent decades preparing to lead. But something else was happening at the very same time in a different corner of the family. Because King Charles was not the only member of the royal household whose health had defined the years just past. There was another story, one that had already reached its own quiet turning point almost exactly 1 year before. And to understand what came next for William, that story has to be told first. Chapter 3. Kate's Parallel Journey. 2 generations, 2 diagnoses, 2 very different public journeys towards the same word, recovery. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had spent her own period out of public view following her cancer diagnosis, choosing to share updates directly with the public rather than through the usual filter of royal correspondence and unnamed sources. That choice had mattered. In an institution known for distance, her willingness to speak plainly, in her own words, on her own timeline, had reshaped how the public related to her. By January, she had confirmed what so many had been hoping to hear: her own remission. It had been exactly a year since that confirmation when she marked her birthday not with a public appearance, but with something quieter, the final chapter of a video series she had been releasing privately, reflecting on the season she associated most with healing. Days later, she stepped back into public duty beside her husband. Charing Cross Hospital, January the 8th, their first joint appearance of the year. 2 people who had spent recent years learning what it meant to be a patient, standing together in a hospital corridor, thanking staff who understood exactly what that meant. It was a small appearance by royal standards, no grand ceremony, no elaborate staging, but it carried weight most engagements do not. Because for the public it was proof that recovery was possible, proof that the family, who so often felt distant, had lived through the same fear that ordinary families live through in hospital waiting rooms every single day. And for William, standing beside her, it was something else entirely. A rehearsal. Whether he realized it in that moment or not, he had just spent a year learning how to stand beside someone recovering from illness, how to be present without performing, how to let quiet support speak louder than any statement. He was about to need every part of that experience, because barely a season later it would be his father standing at the center of the same kind of story, and this time there would be no stepping back for William, only forward. Chapter 4. William's Quiet Preparation. Not every act of leadership happens where cameras can see it. Some of it happens in meeting rooms, in hiring decisions, in the unglamorous work of building a team built to withstand pressure before that pressure ever arrives. According to reports from royal watchers close to Buckingham Palace, William had begun assembling exactly that kind of team, bringing in specialists experienced in navigating institutions through periods of intense public scrutiny. It was not a dramatic move. No headline captured it in a single striking image, but it told its own story. A future king, quietly preparing the machinery around him long before any single crisis forced his hand. Why prepare if nothing is wrong? Because in an institution built on continuity, the safest moment to prepare is always the one before you think you'll need it. William had watched his father lead through 2 years of treatment while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. He had watched his wife rebuild her own public life one careful step at a time. He understood, perhaps better than anyone outside that family ever could, that health crises inside the monarchy are never only medical. They are logistical, they are emotional. They ripple through every appointment, every appearance, every carefully balanced calendar. So he built for it, quietly, deliberately, the way most real preparation happens, not with speeches, but with decisions nobody claps for. And then, almost as if the calendar itself had been waiting for him to finish, the moment arrived. His father's broadcast reached the public, the language shifted, the questions began, and William, for the first time in this particular chapter of the family's story, stepped forward not as a son standing quietly in the background, but as the person the public was now watching most closely. What happens when preparation meets the moment it was built for? That is where the next part of this story begins.
There is a particular kind of pressure that comes with being watched for a reaction you never asked to give. William had spent his entire life being observed, but this was different. This was the public searching his face, his posture, his public schedule for any sign of how deeply his father's health update had actually landed. He did not give them a dramatic statement. He gave them something else. Presence. In the weeks following the broadcast, William's public appearances carried a different tone, steadier, more visible. A future king choosing to be seen at exactly the moment his family needed the public to feel reassured. He stood beside Catherine again. He continued the engagements already on his calendar. He did not disappear into private grief, and he did not perform composure for the cameras either. He simply continued, publicly, consistently. For an institution that survives on the appearance of stability, that continuation said more than any single quote could have. Because here is what people forget about royal duty. It is rarely about grand declarations. It is about showing up, again and again, especially when showing up is hard. William showing up week after week beside a father managing a reduced but still uncertain health picture, and beside a wife who understood that particular fear better than almost anyone alive, that was its own quiet answer to the questions the public had been asking. Not a breaking of silence through words, a breaking of silence through presence. The public noticed. Commentary shifted. Even those who had spent months speculating about the family's next steps found themselves for a moment simply watching a son stand beside his father in Scotland at a Parliament opening, doing the work he had spent his whole life preparing for. It was not a moment built for headlines. It was better than that. It was real. And it left many watching with a single thought they could not quite shake. This family had been tested, and so far, they were still standing. Chapter 6. What comes next? Where does this story leave the monarchy? Not with an ending, with a pause. King Charles continues his public duties, his schedule fuller than many expected at this stage of his treatment. Scotland, Parliament, garden parties beside Camilla, Anne, and Edward. A king choosing to be visible on his own terms, exactly as he said he would be. Catherine continues her own steady return, one engagement at a time, carrying the particular kind of quiet authority that only comes from having survived something the public watched her survive. And William continues doing what he has always done best when it matters most, standing close, staying present, letting his actions carry the weight his words don't always need to. No one inside that family has declared this chapter closed, because it isn't. The palace itself said so much, a precautionary phase, continuously monitored, reviewed as needed, which means the real story is not behind us, it is still unfolding, quietly, appointment by appointment, appearance by appearance, the same way it always has inside this family. So what happens when the next update arrives? What happens if the language shifts again, softer or harder than anyone expects? That is not a question this video can answer, but it is one we will be watching closely. Because next time, we're going deeper into the moment few people are talking about yet, the specific role Catherine is quietly stepping into as William's public presence grows, and what royal insiders say that shift could mean for the next decade of the monarchy. You will not want to miss it.